His emails tried to destroy me, but they became his downfall. My name is Ava Sinclair, and this is the story of how the man I trusted, my mentor, my colleague, my friend, tried to destroy my entire career with secret emails sent behind my back. But he made one mistake. He underestimated how much betrayal can sharpen a woman's mind, and how poetic justice always finds its way home. The day my life cracked open was a Tuesday morning in downtown Seattle, inside the glass walls of Technova, the company I had given 6 loyal years. I was sipping burnt break room coffee when my manager, Elise, called me into her office. She looked pale, unsure, like she was about to hold a funeral. "Ava, we received some emails. About you." I frowned. "Emails?" She turned her monitor toward me. The subject line punched me in the chest. "Concerns about Ava Sinclair's competence." My breath stopped. The sender, Mark Rowan, my mentor, my supervisor, the man who once said I had more potential than anyone he'd ever worked with. Inside the email, he wrote that I was unstable, careless, emotionally erratic, that I was compromising client work, that I was not fit for leadership. It felt like my lungs folded inward. Elise kept talking, but her words melted into a numb ringing in my ears. Mark wasn't just a supervisor. He was the one who pushed me to apply for the senior lead position. The one who said he believed in me. Now he was secretly assassinating my character. And the worst part? The email was dated 2 hours after he'd taken me out to lunch and toasted to my bright future. That was the moment I learned true betrayal doesn't bleed. It burns. By Wednesday, the office felt colder. Not literally, Seattle was already freezing, but emotionally. People kept glancing at me, then quickly looking away, like I was contagious. At lunch, I walked into the cafeteria and conversations dropped like someone had hit mute. Even my close coworker, Jenna, avoided my eyes. Mark sat at his usual table, wearing a smug, polished smile. The kind of smile that said, "I control the narrative now." He waved at me like nothing had happened. I felt sick. Elise called me again. She said HR wanted to review my recent performance. The word stung because I knew what that meant. They were considering putting me on a performance improvement plan, the corporate kiss of death. That evening, I sat in my car for 23 minutes, fingers trembling on the steering wheel. 6 years of hard work, loyalty, and sacrifice slipping from me because of one man's cowardice. But then something shifted inside me. A cold, quiet clarity. Mark didn't just want the promotion, he wanted me gone, erased. He wanted my career to collapse so his could rise without competition. He thought I'd break. But betrayal has a strange way of sharpening your instincts. I wouldn't break. I would watch. I would wait. And when the moment came, I would make sure he regretted ever typing my name. The turning point came by accident or fate. 2 days later, I stayed late at the office preparing documents HR demanded. My floor was empty except for the humming of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of janitors vacuuming. Around 9:40 p.m., I walked past Mark's office, dark, empty, when a blinking notification reflected off his glass door. His monitor was still on. A bad habit of his. His screensaver hadn't locked. I should have kept walking. I really should have. But something tugged at me. A whisper, "See what he's been doing." I stepped inside, heart pounding. His inbox opened automatically. Hundreds of emails. But one folder caught my eye. Yes, issues. My initials. My stomach tightened. Inside the folder were not 1, not 2, but 37 emails he'd sent to HR, senior leadership, and even clients. Each one carefully crafted lies about my behavior, my work, my personality. He wrote that I fabricated project data, that I yelled at teammates, that I ignored company protocols. Things so ridiculous I laughed, then felt tears gather. But then, I saw something darker. A forwarded message from Mark to a competitor company in San Francisco, telling them I was burning out and likely seeking new opportunities, subtly sabotaging my chances anywhere else. He wasn't just trying to ruin my job. He was trying to erase my entire career. I exhaled shakily.
Fine.
If he wanted war, he had just handed me my first weapon. I spent the night tossing, replaying every memory of Mark, every compliment, every "you've got this," every time he pretended to be my ally. Now I knew the truth. He'd been dismantling me piece by piece for months. By morning, I had a suspicion. Why would a seasoned, well-respected supervisor go to such lengths? I dug deeper. Through a trusted coworker in accounting, someone who still believed in me, I learned something shocking. Mark was under investigation for mismanaging project funds. The audit team had flagged several inconsistencies linked to his department. And guess who was next in line to supervise those accounts?
Me.
It hit me like a slap. If I got promoted, his secrets would surface. If I stayed, I was a threat. If I left, he'd be safe. I wasn't his competition. I was his liability. That day, he approached me near the elevators with false concern dripping from his voice. "Ava, HR tells me they're reviewing your performance. Hang in there, okay? If you need support, I'm here." I looked him dead in the eyes. For the first time, he flinched, because I wasn't broken. I wasn't scared. I knew, and knowledge is where revenge begins. Revenge, I realized, doesn't begin with fire. It begins with strategy. So I started small. I copied the entire ES Issues email folder onto an encrypted drive. 42 emails in total, each one a calculated lie. Then I transferred them to my personal, cloud-based vault. Next, I filed a confidential report with the HR integrity line, not about the emails yet, but about Mark's financial inconsistencies. Anonymous.
Clean.
Traceable to no one. Then I waited. Over the next week, I watched Mark like a detective studying a suspect. Every smirk, every whispered conversation, every sudden email he sent late at night, it all fueled my resolve. But my greatest advantage came unexpectedly. Jenna, the same friend who avoided me earlier, showed up at my apartment one rainy Seattle evening. "I need to tell you something," she whispered. She looked terrified. She revealed that Mark had pressured several coworkers to document concerns about me. He manipulated them with threats of bad reviews and withheld promotions. She handed me a USB. "He told us to send these to HR. I couldn't. I kept them instead." "I'm sorry, Ava." Inside were drafts, emails,
Notes. Proof.
not just that he lied, but that he instructed others to participate. My revenge was no longer a distant idea. It was becoming a blade, sharp, polished, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I knew exposing Mark wouldn't be easy. He was respected, charming, and had spent years building the illusion of being the perfect leader. If I went after him recklessly, it would backfire.
So I needed a setup.
I began by requesting a formal meeting with HR, framed as an opportunity to clarify misunderstandings about my performance. They accepted immediately. Mark's poison had already primed them. But this was exactly what I wanted. When I walked into the HR conference room, Mark was already there, pretending to be surprised.
"Ava?"
"I didn't know you'd be joining us." Liar. I took my seat and placed a calm smile on my face, one I didn't feel. They asked about the allegations. I played my part perfectly, confused, concerned, willing to cooperate. I apologized for anything that might have been misinterpreted. I thanked them for their transparency. Mark relaxed. He thought he'd won. Then I asked them a seemingly innocent question. Could I have copies of every email that contributed to these concerns, just so I can respond fully? Mark tensed. HR paused. "We can arrange that." The trap was set. Because once they handed me those emails, the official set, I could compare them with the ones Mark hadn't meant for anyone to see. And discrepancies? Discrepancies could ruin careers. Especially his. 2 days later, HR sent me the email packet. I stayed late again in an empty conference room, the city lights flickering through fogged windows as I spread the documents across the table. I compared everything. That's when I saw it. Several emails included in my performance file were polished, professional, too polished. They didn't match the drafts Jenna had given me or the versions I pulled from Mark's unlocked computer. Some phrases were altered. Dates didn't align. One email was timestamped during a meeting I was physically in with Mark. He couldn't have written it. He forged it. On company time. On company servers. The evidence was more than incriminating, it was radioactive. My chest tightened as I realized the weight of what I held. This wasn't just a petty sabotage attempt. This was corporate fraud, falsification of HR records, coordinated defamation, and possibly obstruction of an audit. Mark hadn't just dug his own grave. He'd decorated it. I texted Jenna, "I need your help. Tomorrow." She responded immediately, "Anything." The next morning, Mark walked past me in the lobby with that arrogant tilt of his chin, the posture of a man convinced the world bowed to him. If only he knew how fast his world was crumbling, and how quiet my revenge would be, until it wasn't. Jenna arrived at my apartment wearing a hoodie and fear in her eyes. "Ava, if he finds out." "He won't," I reassured her. "But I can't do this alone." We spent hours organizing everything. Mark's forged emails, the drafts he pressured coworkers to write, screenshots from his unlocked computer, the anonymous reports about his financial misconduct, timestamps proving fabricated claims. By noon, the picture was clear. Mark wasn't a manipulative supervisor. He was a full-blown corporate criminal. But we needed someone with authority, someone who wouldn't bend to Mark's charm, someone outside the HR circle he'd contaminated. So I called an external ethics officer from Technova's Chicago headquarters. I had met him once during a leadership conference. He'd given a speech about protecting employees from internal predators. When I emailed him requesting a confidential meeting, I attached only one thing, a single forged email. Within an hour, he replied, "Meeting approved. Do not speak to HR or your supervisor. Prepare everything." That's when I knew. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was justice. And Mark would never see it coming because he believed loyalty was something he could weaponize. But loyalty isn't blind. It just waits for the right moment to open its eyes. The company flew me out to Chicago quietly. No alerts, no internal memo. The ethics officer insisted on secrecy. Jenna slipped me a supportive note before I left. He underestimated the wrong woman. The flight felt surreal. Cloudy skies drifted below as I replayed Mark's fake concern, his fake encouragement, his fake mentorship. I realized I had grieved for a relationship that never existed. He never believed in me.
He only pretended to.
Chicago greeted me with icy winds and gray skies. At Technova headquarters, I was escorted to a windowless compliance room. The ethics team sat with laptops open, the atmosphere thick with seriousness. "Begin whenever you're ready," the lead officer said. I took a breath and began unveiling everything. The forged emails, the coerced drafts, the secret folder from his computer, the conflicting timestamps, the messages to the San Francisco competitor, the financial red flags. The room grew colder with every piece of evidence. When I handed over the USB from Jenna, containing the raw drafts he forced employees to write, the officer stopped taking notes. "This is extensive." He looked up at me. "Ava, what you've brought us is a potential criminal case." My pulse pounded. This was bigger than I imagined. And Mark had no clue he was already caught. When I returned to Seattle, everything felt different. Charged, electric, dangerous. Headquarters had launched a confidential internal review, and only a handful of people knew the real target. Mark continued strutting around the office like a king, blissfully unaware that his castle had already begun to sink. He even stopped by my desk. "Ava," he said warmly, placing a hand on my chair, "I'm glad you're still keeping your head up. I know performance issues are hard, but resilience is important." I smiled at him, a slow, cold smile that made his eyes flicker. For the first time, he felt something, a crack of fear. Meanwhile, unknown to him, executives were quietly pulling his financial logs, interviewing his past subordinates, cross-checking his projects, and decrypting archived server data. Every hour tightened the noose. Every minute erased his innocence. and every second brought me closer to the justice he tried to deny me. But I waited.
Silently.
Because revenge isn't loud. Revenge isn't impulsive. Revenge is a storm. One that brews quietly. Until the sky finally breaks. And soon, very soon, Mark Rowan would face the thunder he created with his own hands. Monday morning arrived like the quiet before an earthquake. I sat at my desk in Technova's Seattle office, pretending to work, but everything inside me thrummed with anticipation. At 10:14 a.m., the first tremor hit. Mark was called into an impromptu meeting with senior leadership. He walked past my workspace wearing his usual confident smirk, but this time I noticed the stiffness in his shoulders. His steps lacked rhythm. He felt something shifting. 30 minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. Coworkers began whispering. He's been gone a while. What's this about? Did something happen? By 1:22 p.m., Mark returned, his face pale, jaw clenched so tightly it looked wired shut. He avoided eye contact with everyone, especially me. He went straight into his office and slammed the door. Minutes later, he emerged again, this time heading toward HR with a folder tucked under his arm. His tie was loosened, his hands trembling. The storm had begun. That afternoon, an internal announcement quietly circulated. An audit review has been initiated in the Project Oversight Division. People assumed it was routine. But Mark knew. He knew audits didn't appear out of thin air. He knew someone somewhere had triggered this. And judging by the way he watched me pack my bag that evening, he suspected exactly who. The next day, Mark cornered me near the elevator. "Ava," he said softly, too softly, "can we talk?" My pulse remained calm. "I have a meeting. It'll take a minute." His eyes darted nervously around the hallway. Gone was the confident manipulator. In his place stood a man who felt the ground crumbling beneath him. "What's happening?" he whispered. "Why was I called in for an audit review? Did you say something?" I met his gaze with practiced confusion. "About what?" He swallowed. "About anything." I let silence stretch until discomfort prickled across his face. "Mark," I finally said, "if something's wrong, maybe you should talk to leadership." The elevator dinged. I stepped inside. He moved forward as if to follow, then stopped, gripping the door frame. "Ava, please. If you know something, tell me." It was almost pathetic. But betrayal deserves no sympathy. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, the doors sliding shut between us. The last thing I saw was the panic settling into his features, a man realizing his lies were finally starting to strangle him. And he didn't even know the worst was yet to come. By Thursday, leadership's patience had run out. Mark was summoned to a formal inquiry panel, a rare, high-stakes meeting reserved for major corporate misconduct. It was held behind closed doors on the 16th floor, far above our usual workspace. I wasn't required to attend, but I was summoned afterward. The compliance officer from Chicago joined via video conference. The room felt frozen, and the silence was thick with tension. "Ava," the VP of Operations began, "we want to thank you for cooperating in a very sensitive matter." I nodded, remaining perfectly still. "Your anonymous submission was crucial in alerting us to serious irregularities." Mark had no idea it was me. He still believed he could sniff out the whistleblower. He was wrong. They asked me several clarifying questions, strictly factual, strictly procedural, nothing emotional. I delivered every answer with calm precision. No anger, no theatrics. Just truth. Truth so sharp it cut cleaner than revenge ever could. Before I left, the VP added quietly, "You did the right thing." Not many people would have had the courage. As I walked back to my desk, I felt something shift inside me. Not triumph, not gloating, but a quiet reclaiming of dignity Mark tried to strip from me. Justice was moving, and soon it would run straight through him. The following Monday was the day Mark's carefully crafted empire finally cracked. I arrived early, the Seattle air still cold against my skin. As I stepped into the building, something felt off. People were gathered near the glass railing overlooking the lobby. Whispers filled the air. Is that him? What's happening? He looks awful. I approached and saw Mark downstairs, surrounded by 2 compliance officers and an HR representative. His face was gray, eyes hollow, suit disheveled, like a man who hadn't slept in days. He was clutching a box. His box. The universal symbol of corporate downfall. They escorted him toward the exit. But right when he reached the revolving doors, he looked up, straight at me. Our eyes locked. In that single moment, I saw every emotion he tried to bury. Fear, shame, disbelief, rage, regret, all colliding at once. He opened his mouth to speak, but the officer nudged him forward. He kept staring until the doors spun him out of sight. Coworkers looked at me, some shocked, some suspicious, some suddenly remembering all the times Mark discouraged my ideas. The king had fallen, and the woman he underestimated, the woman he tried to erase, stood watching his downfall without raising a single finger, because the truth had done all the work for me. Mark's termination should have been the end, but predators rarely retreat quietly. The day after he was escorted out, I received a threatening email from an anonymous address. You think you've won? You've only made things worse for yourself. I knew it was him. The tone, the punctuation, the arrogance. Unmistakable. He hadn't learned a thing. That same afternoon, HR informed me that Mark was contesting his termination and claiming I manipulated leadership with fabricated allegations. He was trying to pull me down with him. But here's what he didn't know. Headquarters had discovered something even bigger. During their audit, they found encrypted exchanges between Mark and the competitor company, the same ones he'd emailed about my burnout. Except now they had uncovered financial links and potential data leaks. Criminal ones. The company's legal department requested a detailed statement from me regarding every interaction I had ever had with Mark, especially his attempts to sabotage my reputation. By trying to retaliate, he'd accidentally reopened the investigation wider, exposing even more of his wrongdoing. And for the first time, I realized his downfall wasn't the end of my revenge story.
No.
It was the beginning of the part where the world finally saw who he really was.
And who I had been all along.
The company's legal team booked me a private room, neutral gray walls, a glass pitcher of water, and a recorder blinking red on the table. A woman named Danielle, calm and sharp-eyed, led the questioning. She wasn't here to intimidate me. She was here for truth. The kind of truth that ruins giants. We have reason to believe, she began, that information was leaked to an external competitor. We also believe you were targeted because you were close to discovering the inconsistencies in Mark's financial reports. My heart tightened. They weren't just confirming my suspicions, they were proving them. I opened my laptop and slid the drive across the table. This is everything. Drafts he forced others to write. Forged copies. Timestamps. The secret folder on his computer.
Danielle plugged it in.
The screen lit with files. Neatly arranged evidence of months of manipulation, deceit, and fraud. When she reached the email he sent at the same time he was physically in a meeting with me, she froze. This is irrefutable, she murmured. She leaned back, studying me, almost impressed. Ava, this is more than an HR issue. This may become a federal case. A chill washed over me. What began as workplace betrayal was turning into criminal prosecution. Mark had dug a grave so deep even he couldn't climb out. And now, he was still digging. Blue Book Chapter 17. The threat escalates. Approximate. 240 words. Mark didn't disappear quietly. That night, as the Seattle rain slapped against my apartment windows, I received another email from his anonymous address. You think you're safe? You think they'll believe you forever? I will take back everything you stole from me. Stole? I laughed, bitterly. He'd stolen my peace, my reputation, my future. I had taken nothing. But the threat wasn't what terrified me. It was the attachment, a photo of me walking out of Technova headquarters, taken from a distance. He was watching me. I forwarded the email to the legal team immediately. Within minutes, Danielle called. Ava, listen carefully. Do not respond to him. Do not engage. We suspected he might retaliate, but this crosses into harassment and stalking. My knees weakened. We'll handle it, she continued, but you must be careful. The next morning, security escorted me from the parking garage into the building. Coworkers stared as if I were royalty or a suspect. But the truth was I was neither. I was the woman standing between the company and a lawsuit they couldn't afford. I was the one holding the thread that would unravel everything Mark had tried to hide. But his desperation was evolving, turning volatile, turning dangerous. And the storm I once controlled was starting to crackle at the edges. Blue Book Chapter 18. The turning tide, approximate 235 words. The following week brought a shift I never expected. HR scheduled a formal meeting, this time not to question me, but to address the broader implications of the investigation. My stomach knotted. I didn't know if I'd be blamed, praised, or dismissed. When I entered the boardroom, a dozen faces turned to me, executives, attorneys, compliance officers. Serious people, important people, and they stood
For me.
Ava, the VP of Operations, said, "Your integrity throughout this ordeal has been exemplary. You've shown professionalism under extreme pressure, and we want to acknowledge that." My throat tightened. He continued, "We discovered Mark manipulated HR documentation, coerced team members, violated protocol, and attempted to sabotage your career. Without your actions, these issues would have continued unnoticed. They offered me something unexpected, a temporary oversight role. One Mark once held, to help restructure the department he had corrupted. I felt a mix of shock, pride, and fear. Taking the role meant proximity to the chaos Mark left behind. It meant stepping into the fire. But it also meant reclaiming what he tried to steal. "I accept," I said quietly. As the meeting adjourned, Danielle pulled me aside. "Just so you know," she whispered, "the case is moving forward and law enforcement will want to speak with you soon." Mark wasn't done paying. Not even close. Blue Book Chapter 19. The breaking point, approximate 240 words. The pressure intensified. Every day brought new updates from the investigation. Some small, some devastating. Mark had deleted files, shifted budgets, even created shadow accounts. He wasn't just unethical. He was criminal. But while the company tightened the legal noose, Mark spiraled into desperation. One Friday evening, as I walked to my car, a figure stepped out from behind a column in the parking garage. My heart slammed. "Ava." Mark. His face sunken, unshaven, eyes wild. Rainwater dripped from his hair. He looked like a man who had drowned and somehow crawled back up. "I need to talk to you," he pleaded. Security was too far to hear. I stayed still, every instinct screaming danger. "Why are you doing this to me?" he said, voice breaking. "You owe me. I built your career. I protected you. You tried to destroy me," I said quietly. He flinched. "I made a mistake. But you..." His voice cracked into a shout. "You're ruining my life." "You ruined your own life, Mark," I replied. "I just stopped you from ruining mine." His eyes filled with something unhinged, rage mixed with desperation. "I can fix this," he whispered. "I can fix everything if you retract what you said. Just tell them you misunderstood. Tell them."
No.
The word hung between us like a blade. Security approached. Mark backed away, drenched, breathing hard. "This isn't over," he hissed. But he was wrong. It was nearing the end. Blue Book Chapter 20. The public unraveling, approximate 240 words. The final blow didn't come from me. It came from the truth. A week later, Technova issued a company-wide email. Former supervisor Mark Rowan has been referred to federal investigators following evidence of document falsification, data manipulation, and attempted corporate espionage. Within hours, news outlets picked up the story. Seattle Times, Business Chronicle, even a tech blog in New York. The headlines were brutal. Technova manager accused of sabotage and data leaks. Internal conspiracy exposed by employee whistleblower. Corporate fraud unveiled, how one woman's evidence broke the case. Co-workers stopped me in hallways. Ava, that was you? You saved the company. We're so sorry for doubting you. But the most unexpected moment happened when Jenna rushed to my office, tears in her eyes. They printed the emails, she whispered. What emails? She handed me her phone. There it was.
Every email Mark had sent about me.
Every lie, every accusation, every manipulation. Exposed.
Public.
Not by me, but by the investigators filing court documents. Mark had wanted to destroy me with emails. Now the world was destroying him. With those same emails. Poetic justice. Sharp.
Clean.
Inevitable. And the best part? The final chapter of his downfall hadn't even happened yet. The night of the gala arrived like a scene from a movie. New York's skyline glowed behind the glass walls of the rooftop garden at the Meridian Hotel. I wore a charcoal gown that shimmered like quiet confidence. My heart, however, thudded like a warning drum. Everyone was here, investors, board members, and every tech journalist who could smell scandal from a mile away. Marcus arrived last, smiling, confident, completely unaware. When he walked toward me, pretending we were still colleagues working through a misunderstanding, my stomach tightened. He leaned in, lowering his voice. You're playing a dangerous game, Emma. Remember, I always win. I gave him a soft smile. No, Marcus. This time, you just think you're ahead. The lights dimmed. A pianist played softly. And then the stage opened for the keynote presentation delivered by me. And my trap was finally set. Tonight, justice would taste cold and clean. Chapter 22. The Wired Expose. I began speaking about cybersecurity ethics. Ironic, given Marcus' sins. Guests listened politely, but their attention sharpened when the screens behind me flickered. A sound cue chimed. Then the first email appeared. Marcus' private email, subject line. Let's take her down before she gets too powerful. The audience gasped. I didn't stop there. One by one, timed, automated, his emails spilled across the screen. Messages plotting to destroy my career. Leaking confidential data. Bribing a competitor. Even discussing sabotaging a federal compliance audit. Each slide hit like a hammer. Marcus shouted from the crowd. Stop the presentation. Emma, what are you doing? Security blocked him. Board members stared at him like he'd transformed into a monster before their eyes. The journalists were already typing. My voice stayed calm. This company deserves transparency. And the truth deserves light. The crowd was stunned. Silent. Electrified. Marcus turned pale. His world had just begun to crumble. Chapter 23. The Fall of Marcus Hale. The aftermath was immediate. Security escorted Marcus out of the building as cameras flashed like lightning around him. By the time the gala ended, Wired, Bloomberg, and Forbes had already released breaking stories. Tech executive exposed in internal sabotage scandal. At midnight, the board called an emergency meeting. By morning, Marcus Hale was terminated. By afternoon, he was under federal investigation for data tampering, breach of corporate ethics, and attempting to manipulate shareholder information. The company's stock soared as investors praised the firm's swift response and transparency, a narrative crafted by yours truly. Meanwhile, Marcus couldn't even step outside his apartment without paparazzi catching his downfall. I watched the news quietly, sipping tea in my New York apartment. He had tried to erase my career. Now he had no career left to defend. But the final move, the one that would make him feel what he made me feel, was still ahead. Chapter 24. His Final Unraveling. A week later, Marcus requested a private meeting. Against every instinct, I agreed, on neutral ground, a small cafe in Brooklyn. He looked shattered. Hair unkempt, dark circles under his eyes. The image of a man who had lost everything. You ruined me, he whispered. I leaned forward.
No.
You ruined yourself. I simply stopped covering for you. His voice cracked. I can't get hired anywhere. They think I'm toxic. Even my fiancé left. I studied him. This once powerful man now shrinking under the weight of his own choices. Why me, Marcus? Of everyone you could have betrayed, why me? His answer came out broken. You're better. And I hated how much that scared me. There it was, the truth he'd never admit until he had nothing left. He walked out of the cafe defeated, shoulders slumped, soul heavy. But life still had one more twist waiting for him. A twist he could never have predicted. Chapter 25, The Poetic Ending, Final Payoff. 3 months later, the company was invited to present a groundbreaking cybersecurity proposal to the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. The DOJ representative walked into the room. My heart nearly stopped. Marcus. He had taken a temporary government consultant role. Apparently, the only place willing to give him a trial assignment. He froze when he saw me.
I smiled politely.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hale. He swallowed painfully, knowing our roles had reversed. The man who once tried to destroy my career now had to review my work, approve my proposal, and recommend whether our company would receive a multi-million-dollar federal contract. During the session, he read my technical report in silence. His hands shook slightly. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. This is brilliant. My eyes held his. It's the work you once said I'd never be capable of. He nodded, shame clouding his face. I was wrong. The contract was approved. By the time we exited the room, he stood alone in the hallway, watching me walk into a future he could never reach. I didn't destroy him. I simply revealed him. And, in the end, his own darkness defeated him far more deeply than I ever could. Poetic justice served. Quiet, powerful, unforgettable. Thank you for listening to my story. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share my videos. Thank you.